The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched wide like an ancient cathedral. Thousands of seats rose in curved rows, each filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some had scales that caught the light. Others had feathers or fur or skin that changed colors with their moods. At the center of it all sat Ambassador Sarah Chen, the only human in the massive room. She looked small in her simple black suit, her hands folded on the table before her. Around her, empty chairs marked where other human diplomats had sat just hours before. They had been asked to leave. Only she remained to hear the final judgment. The trial had lasted 3 months. Every day Sarah had listened as species after species accused humanity of crimes. They said humans hoarded technology, keeping the best inventions for themselves. They claimed human culture was spreading too fast, corrupting traditional ways of life. Worst of all, they argued that humans refused to follow proper galactic laws. Sarah remembered when it all started. 5 years ago, the Craxi Empire had complained that humans were advancing too quickly. The Velthron Consortium worried that human trade practices were too fair, making other species look bad. Small grievances had grown into formal charges. Now Counselor Prime Thexvar stood at the central podium. He was Craxi, 7 feet tall with blue-black skin and eyes like yellow flames. His voice boomed across the hall as he read the final votes. "The Zephyrian Republic votes against humanity," he announced. Sarah felt a small pain in her chest. Humans had helped the Zephyrians fix their dying planet just 20 years ago. Before that, their world had been a frozen wasteland. The Kalari Collective votes against humanity. Another betrayal. Human doctors had saved the Kalari from a plague that would have killed billions. The cure still ran in special clinics on their homeworld. The Dothraki mining clans vote against humanity. Sarah almost smiled at this one. The Dothraki lived in asteroid colonies that humans had built for them. Every mining ship they used came from human designs. The votes kept coming. Species that humans had helped reach the stars. Worlds that humans had saved from disasters. Governments that humans had helped establish. One by one, they all voted the same way. 847 species voted against humanity. Only 3 voted in favor. The small Terran colonies that had no choice. 12 species abstained, probably too afraid to take sides. Thexvar's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he announced the punishment. Humans would stop all research and development. Every human world would accept council oversight. The Terran Federation would pay reparations worth 60% of their entire economy for the next 100 years. "These terms are final," Thexvar declared. "Humanity will submit or face total isolation from galactic civilization." Sarah stood slowly. Every eye in the hall focused on her. Cameras broadcast her image across the galaxy. She looked around the room one last time, seeing faces that had once been friendly. Now they watched her with coldness or shame or eager anticipation. "The Terran Federation acknowledges the Council's decision," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "We will comply with all terms." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some seemed surprised by how easily she accepted their judgment. Others looked disappointed, as if they had wanted a fight. Sarah picked up her small briefcase and walked toward the exit. But at the door she turned back. "Effective immediately, all human personnel will withdraw from non-human space," she announced. "All human assets, technologies, and research will be removed from Council territories. We wish you well in your future endeavors." She left without waiting for questions. Behind her, the hall erupted in confused chatter. This was not what they had expected. They thought humans would beg for mercy or threaten revenge. Instead, Sarah Chen had simply agreed. In the Craxi section, Admiral Korthak frowned. Something felt wrong about this. Humans never gave up so easily. They were stubborn, always fighting for compromise and second chances. This calm acceptance worried him more than angry threats would have. In the Velthron economic zone, trader Prince Veltharn was already calculating profits. With humans gone, his consortium could raise prices on trade routes. Human shipping companies always undercut them with better efficiency and lower costs. Finally, they would be eliminated. Chancellor Veltar of the Zephyrian Republic felt a moment of doubt. The human terraforming teams had been working on atmospheric adjustments for years. But surely his own people could handle such simple maintenance work. How hard could it be? On the medical station orbiting Kalari Prime, Dr. Zix Hala was reviewing treatment schedules when an emergency message appeared on his screen. All human medical staff would be leaving within 2 weeks. He stared at the message in confusion. The humans ran half the treatment protocols for genetic disorders. Who would replace them? Across the galaxy, similar messages appeared on screens and communication devices. Human teachers submitted resignation letters. Human engineers started packing their equipment. Human researchers began encrypting their databases. Most council members dismissed these actions as simple compliance. Humans were following orders, nothing more. But a few noticed something strange. The humans weren't angry or resentful. They worked with calm efficiency, as if they had been planning this withdrawal for years. On Earth, President Elizabeth Santos sat in her office reading reports. Communication requests were flooding in from across the galaxy. Some were from species demanding faster human compliance. Others seemed confused about exactly what the humans were taking with them. Her aide, James Morrison, knocked and entered. "Madam President, we're getting calls from the Nexus trade station. They want to know if our departure includes the quantum communication arrays." "All human technology," Santos replied firmly. The council was very clear about technological hoarding. "But those arrays handle 70% of galactic communications traffic." Santos smiled coldly. "Then I'm sure the council has backup systems in place." Similar conversations were happening on hundreds of human ships and stations. Humans packed their belongings with methodical care. They answered questions politely but offered no suggestions or alternatives. When pressed about what would happen after they left, humans simply stated that such decisions were now the council's responsibility. The Galactic News Network tried to frame the withdrawal as a victory for independence. "Galaxy finally free from human interference," read the headlines. But some reporters noticed troubling details in the footage. Humans were taking more than anyone had realized. Equipment that everyone assumed belonged to other species turned out to have human serial numbers. Software systems that seemed universal were actually human-designed and human-maintained. In the council chambers, Thexvar met with his closest advisors. The Craxi celebration had been loud and proud, but now reality was setting in. His military aide handed him a preliminary report on human assets. "Sir, we may have a problem," the aide said nervously. "The humans are taking their supply chain management software. Our logistics division says that handles 47% of our shipping calculations." Thexvar waved dismissively. "We'll build our own systems." How difficult can human software be? But doubt was creeping into other minds. On Harmony Station, the galaxy's largest trade hub, station manager Crix noticed that the departure schedules were becoming chaotic. The humans who had quietly managed traffic flow for decades were gone. Ships that used to dock smoothly now waited in long, confused lines. The withdrawal continued with relentless politeness. Humans smiled, shook hands, and wished their former colleagues well. They left behind no sabotage, no hidden problems, no angry messages. They simply left. And as they left, the galaxy began to realize that maybe, just maybe, they had made a terrible mistake. Dr. Marcus Webb sealed the last container of research samples and looked around his laboratory one final time. For 8 years, this xenobiology lab on Crossroads Station had been his second home. The walls were covered with charts showing genetic patterns from dozens of species. Equipment hummed quietly in the background, analyzing samples that might hold cures for diseases affecting millions of beings across the galaxy. His research partner, Zixhala, stood in the doorway watching him pack. The Velthari scientist's skin had turned a pale blue color that Marcus recognized as deep sadness. "You cannot be serious about leaving," Zix said, his forearms gesturing frantically. "Our cancer research is so close to breakthrough. 6 months, maybe less, and we will have treatment that works on all species." Marcus paused while sealing a data core. The encrypted device contained years of research notes, genetic maps, and experimental results. "I'm sorry, Zix, council orders. No unauthorized technological development. But this could save millions of lives." Marcus picked up his bag and walked to his friend. Yes, it could have. The words hung in the air between them. Zix's skin shifted to confused purple patterns. "Could have?" "Marcus, this research belongs to all of us. You cannot just take it away." "Actually, I can." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "Every piece of equipment in this lab was built with human technology. Every analysis program uses human-designed algorithms. The genetic sequencing methods, the cellular growth techniques, even the statistical models we use. All human innovations." Zix stared at him. That cannot be true. We have been partners for 8 years. Yes, we have been partners. But check the patent records if you want. Check the development histories. Humans designed the tools, then taught others how to use them. Marcus headed toward the door. The council decided that was technological hoarding. So we're taking our hoarded technology home. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On Zephyr Prime, the terraforming teams were shutting down atmospheric processors. Chief Engineer Linda Rodriguez explained the situation to Chancellor Veltar over the communication system. The weather control networks are very complex, she said, her image flickering on the screen. Your people know how to monitor them, but the underlying code that makes adjustments is, well, it's in 17 different human programming languages. Veltar's feathers ruffled with annoyance. Surely you can leave instructions. I tried, Linda replied. But the system makes thousands of micro-adjustments every hour, based on atmospheric pressure, solar radiation, seasonal patterns, and about 40 other variables. It would take years to train someone to understand all the interactions. Then train them. Linda shook her head. The council was very clear. No cultural contamination. Teaching alien species to think like humans apparently counts as contamination. The Chancellor's confusion was visible even across the communication link. But who will maintain the systems when you are gone? That's not my decision to make anymore, Linda said politely. Good luck, Chancellor. The transmission ended, leaving Veltar staring at a blank screen. Outside his window, he could see the artificial aurora that painted their sky in beautiful colors every evening. The terraforming teams had created that as a gift 20 years ago. Now he wondered if it would still be there next month. On Kalari Prime, the medical crisis was becoming apparent faster than anyone expected. Dr. Sarah Kim was the last human physician at the main treatment center. She watched as Kalari medical staff tried to replicate the synthesis process for anti-plague medications. The genetic therapy requires precise timing, Dr. Kim explained to Dr. Hethnal, the senior Kalari physician. The modified proteins must be introduced in sequence with exact intervals between doses. Dr. Hethanal's tentacles waved impatiently. We have observed the process hundreds of times. Surely we can manage. Have you observed the quality control testing? The genetic sequencing that confirms each batch is safe? The contamination protocols that prevent the therapy from mutating back into the original plague strain? The Kalari doctor's skin color shifted to pale yellow. Embarrassment. Those procedures seemed routine. Administrative work. Those procedures are what keep the treatment from accidentally killing people, Dr. Kim said quietly. But don't worry. I'm sure you'll figure it out. She picked up her medical bag and headed for the transport that would take her to the human evacuation ship. Behind her, Dr. Hethanal called out desperately, Wait! Can you not leave written instructions? Detailed protocols? Dr. Kim turned back. The council classified sharing our medical knowledge as technological hoarding. I wouldn't want to violate their ruling. In the Craxi Empire, Admiral Kortok was discovering that military efficiency was more complicated than he had realized. His fleet logistics officer, Commander Vextha, handed him a report that made his yellow eyes dim with concern. Sir, the supply prediction software has failed, Vextha reported. Without it, we cannot calculate fuel requirements, ammunition needs, or food supplies for extended missions. What do you mean, failed? Kortok demanded. The humans who maintained it have left. The software was designed to learn from experience, adjusting predictions based on actual consumption patterns. But none of our programmers understand how the learning algorithms work. Kortok stared at the tactical display that had seemed so clear just weeks ago. Now the supply lines looked like a confused mess of numbers that made no sense. How long before this affects combat readiness? Ships that left port this week will run short of supplies within a month, Vextha admitted. The calculation errors compound over time. In the economic centers of the Velthron Consortium, similar problems were emerging. The banking systems that had seemed so stable were beginning to show cracks. Market prediction models were producing wildly incorrect forecasts. Trade route optimization was failing, causing ships to take longer paths that wasted fuel and time. Trader Prince Veltharn called an emergency meeting of his financial advisors. The ornate conference room filled with beings from various species, all looking worried. Explain to me how our systems could be so dependent on human input, Veltharn demanded. His chief economist, a nervous Thetheran named Pexril, consulted his datapad. The humans never claimed ownership of the systems, my lord. They simply helped maintain them. Small improvements here and there, efficiency updates, bug fixes, small improvements? Well, Pexrill admitted, our analysis shows that these small improvements were made to almost every major economic system in the consortium. The humans worked very quietly, sir. They rarely took credit for their contributions. Veltharn's skin turned an angry red color. Are you telling me that humans have been secretly controlling our economy? Not controlling, sir. More like supporting. The systems still work without them, but not nearly as well. On Earth, President Santos received hundreds of communication requests every day. Most were from species demanding that humans return immediately. Others were confused questions about technical systems that were no longer working properly. Santos read each message carefully, then filed them away. Her response was always the same. The Terran Federation respects the Council's sovereignty and will not interfere in internal galactic affairs. Her staff worried about the growing crisis reports coming from across the galaxy. Agricultural systems failing, communication networks overloading, medical emergencies in species that had relied on human-designed treatments. Madam President, her chief of staff asked during their morning briefing, should we at least offer emergency assistance? People are going to die. Santos looked out the window at the city below. Human cities that had always shared their innovations freely, asked for little in return, and tried to help wherever they could. The Council made their feelings about human assistance very clear, she said finally. They wanted independence from human interference. They're getting exactly what they asked for. The withdrawal continued with mechanical precision. Humans packed their belongings, encrypted their data, and boarded ships heading home. They remained polite and professional to the end. When asked about the consequences of their departure, they simply noted that such matters were now the responsibility of the Council. But across the galaxy, the first signs of collapse were already beginning to show, and the beings who had celebrated humanity's departure were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about what they had actually lost. The first atmospheric warning siren wailed across New Zephyr City just 43 days after the last human terraforming team had departed. Chancellor Veltar stood on his office balcony, watching the artificial aurora flicker and fade like a dying fire. The beautiful lights that had painted their sky for 20 years were disappearing, and his environmental team had no idea how to fix them. Sir, his chief scientist, Dr. Kethvar, approached with obvious reluctance. The atmospheric processors are showing critical errors. The oxygen levels in the northern continent are dropping by 2% every day. Veltar's feathers turned gray with stress. What do your teams recommend? We don't know what to recommend, Dr. Kethvar admitted. The human systems are far more complex than we realized. They don't just maintain our atmosphere, they actively manage it. Every weather pattern, every seasonal change, every solar storm requires thousands of tiny adjustments. The Chancellor stared at the flickering sky. His people had been so proud to see the humans leave. Finally, they would control their own destiny. Now that destiny was suffocating them. How long before the atmosphere becomes unbreathable? 6 months, maybe less, if we cannot restart the northern processors. On Kalari Prime, the medical disaster was already beyond crisis level. The anti-plague medication had run out 3 weeks ago. Dr. Hethanol worked frantically in his laboratory, trying to synthesize new batches. Every attempt ended in failure. His latest batch had contained a genetic error that nearly killed the test subjects. The modified proteins had mutated during synthesis, becoming toxic instead of therapeutic. Without human quality control methods, each new attempt was essentially experimental poison. Doctor, his assistant called from across the lab. We have 17 new plague cases reported this morning. The infection rate is accelerating. Dr. Hethanol's tentacles trembled with exhaustion and fear. Continue with standard isolation procedures. That is all we can do. But they both knew that isolation would only slow the spread. Without the genetic therapy, the plague would eventually break free and sweep across their world again. The disease that humans had controlled for 30 years was coming back with a vengeance. In the depths of space, Admiral Kort Hawk stared at a tactical display that made no sense anymore. His fleet had suffered 3 defeats in the past month against pirates they used to crush easily. The latest disaster involved the proud battleship Dominator, which now drifted helplessly in space with critical system failures. Report, he ordered his chief engineer. Commander Thekval approached with visible reluctance. Sir, the quantum drive initialization sequence has failed again. The ship is trapped in normal space until we can restart the system. What is preventing restart? The diagnostic programs keep finding errors, but we cannot identify what the errors mean. The human documentation references cultural concepts and mathematical theories that we do not understand. Courthawk's yellow eyes flared with frustration. Give me an example. Thekval consulted his datapad. The main error message says, coffee break protocol failed. Insufficient caffeine detected in primary matrix. We have no idea what caffeine is or why the quantum drive would need it. The Admiral realized with growing horror that human engineers had not just built their systems, they had built them to think like humans. References to human culture, humor, and even dietary preferences were embedded in the most critical technologies. How many ships in the fleet are affected? All of them, sir. Every ship with human-upgraded systems is experiencing similar problems. On Harmony Station, chaos ruled the docking bays. Station Manager Crix watched helplessly as ships collided in slow motion, their navigation systems unable to coordinate proper approach vectors. The beautiful ballet of interstellar traffic that he had taken for granted was now a dangerous mess. Manager Crix, his traffic controller, called urgently. The Velthron luxury liner Prosperity is requesting emergency docking. They've been waiting in queue for 18 hours. Crix looked at the display showing hundreds of ships orbiting the station in confused patterns. Without human traffic management systems, even simple docking had become a nightmare. Tell them to wait their turn like everyone else, he said wearily. Sir, they're threatening to dock without permission. Then activate defense systems. Defense systems are offline. The targeting computers use human battle algorithms that we cannot access. Crix felt a cold realization wash over him. The station that served as the galaxy's busiest trade hub was essentially defenseless and blind. If ships decided to ignore traffic control, there was nothing he could do to stop them. In the financial centers of the Veltron Consortium, economic panic was spreading like wildfire. Trader Prince Veltharn paced his office while his advisors delivered increasingly dire reports. My lord, his chief economist announced, the quantum futures market has collapsed completely. Our prediction algorithms are producing negative probability calculations. What does that even mean? Veltharn demanded. It means the system is predicting that transactions have a less than zero chance of occurring, the economist explained helplessly, which is mathematically impossible, but the computers insist the calculations are correct. Stock prices swung wildly as automated trading systems made decisions based on faulty data. Supply chain management had become pure guesswork. Even simple banking transactions were taking hours to process as the network struggled with computational errors. Sir, another advisor interrupted. We're receiving reports that the Dothraki mining stations are going offline. Their automated extractors have been having catastrophic failures. The Dothraki mining operations had been the foundation of galactic resource extraction for decades. Their asteroid colonies produced metals and rare elements that powered civilizations across the galaxy. But now, their human-designed mining equipment was breaking down faster than anyone could repair it. Chief Miner Groktar of the Ceres Collective sent desperate messages to Earth that received no response. His best engineers were baffled by machinery that had worked perfectly for years. The safety systems had been disabled as unnecessarily complex by council-approved technicians. Now, without those safety systems, the mining extractors were destroying themselves and threatening the habitats where millions of Dothraki lived. On the research station Eureka, Dr. Zixhala stared at his cancer research data in despair. Without Marcus Webb and the human analytical tools, months of research had become meaningless numbers. The breakthrough they had been so close to achieving was now impossible. The genetic sequencing data makes no sense without human interpretation algorithms, his assistant reported. Every analysis produces different results. Dr. Zixhala realized that what he had thought was collaborative research had actually been human research with alien participation. The humans had done most of the intellectual work while allowing their partners to believe they were equals. Across the galaxy, similar revelations were occurring. The Thetherin exploration program discovered that their most advanced survey ships couldn't function without human navigation software. The Andorian agricultural systems failed without human-designed pest control protocols. Even simple consumer electronics were breaking down as human-made components wore out without replacement. President Santos received daily briefings on the galactic situation from human intelligence services. The reports painted a picture of civilization slowly unraveling. Madam President, her military advisor noted, some council species are discussing forced recruitment of human technical specialists. Let them try, Santos replied calmly. Every human civilian has been evacuated from council space. Every human military asset has been withdrawn to Terran territory. If they want to start a war over technical support, they'll find it more difficult than they expect. But the crisis was spreading faster than anyone anticipated. Communication networks were failing as quantum relay stations went offline. Trade routes were disrupted as navigation systems produced faulty calculations. Medical emergencies multiplied as treatment protocols failed without human oversight. The Galactic News Network tried to maintain optimistic coverage, but the truth was becoming impossible to hide. Headlines shifted from "Galaxy celebrates independence" to "Technical difficulties plague multiple sectors," to emergency measures implemented across council space. Behind the scenes, panic was setting in among council leadership. Emergency sessions were called as species after species reported critical system failures. The confident celebration of 6 weeks ago had transformed into desperate attempts to prevent complete societal collapse. And on Earth, humans watched the galactic news with calm interest, as if observing an unfortunate but predictable natural disaster occurring very far away. Counselor Prime Thexavar stood before a wall-sized display showing crisis reports from across the galaxy. Red warning indicators covered the map like a spreading plague. Each red dot represented a critical system failure, an economic collapse, or a humanitarian disaster. The blue-black skin of his face had turned pale with stress. "Report," he ordered his aide, though he dreaded what he would hear. Commander Yexhala consulted her datapad with shaking hands. "Sir, 47 star systems are requesting emergency assistance. The Kalari plague has spread to 6 neighboring worlds. The Dothraki asteroid colonies are evacuating due to life support failures. The Zephyrian northern continent is now uninhabitable." Thexvar's yellow eyes dimmed. "What about our military response capabilities? 70% of our fleet is stranded with navigation or propulsion failures. The remaining ships cannot coordinate effectively without human tactical systems. Yesterday, a pirate raiding party defeated an entire battle group because our targeting computers couldn't track their movements." The Counselor Prime sank into his chair. 3 months ago, he had been the proud leader of a galactic civilization finally free from human interference. Now he was watching that civilization crumble faster than anyone had thought possible. A communication request flashed on his screen. Chancellor Veltar of the Zephyrian Republic appeared, looking haggard and desperate. His usually proud feathers were ragged and his voice cracked with exhaustion. "Counselor Prime," Veltar said without ceremony, "my people are dying. We need immediate assistance with our atmospheric systems." "The Council is coordinating emergency aid efforts," Thexvar replied, though they both knew it was meaningless. "Your aid efforts consist of technical teams that don't understand the systems they're trying to fix," Veltar snapped. "We need the humans back." The words hung in the air like an admission of complete defeat. Thexvar felt his own pride crumbling. The humans were found guilty of technological hoarding. The verdict was unanimous. The verdict was wrong. Veltar's voice rose to a desperate shout. "We were fools, all of us. We destroyed the species that was keeping us alive." The communication ended abruptly, leaving Thexvar alone with the weight of his mistakes. More communication requests were backing up. Other species leaders, all facing similar disasters, all beginning to realize the same terrible truth. On Kalari Prime, Dr. Hethanol worked frantically in his laboratory as emergency sirens wailed across the medical district. The plague outbreak had reached critical mass. His people were dying faster than they could count the bodies. "Doctor," his assistant called out in despair, "the latest synthesis attempt has failed again. The proteins are degrading before we can stabilize them." Dr. Hethanol threw his instruments across the lab in frustration. 30 years of human treatments and we learned nothing. How could we be so dependent without realizing it? He stared at the empty research stations where human doctors had worked alongside Kalari physicians. Those humans had always been modest about their contributions, always quick to share credit with their alien colleagues. Now he understood that their modesty had hidden the true extent of their expertise. A young medical student approached hesitantly. "Doctor, I found something in the old archives." Dr. Sarah Kim left detailed notes about the synthesis process, but they're written in human technical language with lots of cultural references. Dr. Hethanol grabbed the files eagerly, then felt his hope die as he read them. The notes were indeed detailed, but they assumed knowledge that the Kalari simply didn't have. References to Murphy's Law contingencies and grandmother's soup temperature protocols made no sense to alien minds. It's not just the science, he realized aloud. It's the way humans think about science. They embedded their culture into everything they built. In the Craxi Military Command Center, Admiral Court Huck faced a situation that would have been humiliating if it weren't so catastrophic. His most advanced dreadnought, the pride of the Craxi fleet, was being towed home by a civilian cargo hauler because its quantum drives had failed completely. "Sir," his intelligence officer reported, "we've discovered something troubling in the archives. Human strategic advisors have been providing what we called supplementary analysis for over 50 years. Supplementary? Courthuck's voice was dangerous. "Sir, it appears that this supplementary analysis was actually correcting fundamental errors in our military doctrine. Our battle strategies, our fleet formations, our tactical algorithms, they were all flawed. The humans had been quietly fixing our mistakes without telling us." The Admiral stared at tactical displays that had once seemed brilliant. Now he could see the errors that human advisors had been silently correcting. Formations that looked impressive but left critical vulnerabilities. Attack patterns that seemed aggressive but wasted energy and resources. His people had been playing at war while humans did the real strategic thinking. How many battles did we win because of human corrections? The intelligence officer's voice was barely a whisper. "All of them, sir. Every major victory in the past 50 years involved human strategic input." On Earth, President Santos sat in the Oval Office reading the latest reports from human intelligence services. The situation in Council space was deteriorating faster than even the most pessimistic projections had predicted. "Madam President," her Chief of Staff announced, "we're receiving formal diplomatic requests from 17 Council species. They want to discuss the possibility of human technical assistance." "What kind of assistance?" Santos asked, though she already knew. "Everything. Medical support, infrastructure maintenance, military advisory services, economic consultation. They're offering significant payment and favorable trade agreements." Santos smiled coldly. "Inform them that the Terran Federation is currently reviewing its policies regarding technological sharing. Any discussions would need to begin with a formal acknowledgement that the original Council verdict was based on false charges." Her aide looked uncomfortable. "They're also threatening to seize human assets that were left behind and force human citizens to return." "Let them try," Santos replied calmly. "They'll find that human assets were more thoroughly integrated into their systems than they realized. Removing them incorrectly will cause even more damage. And as for forcing human citizens to return, they're welcome to try invading Terran space with broken ships and faulty targeting systems." The communication requests kept coming. Some were desperate pleas for help. Others were angry demands. A few contained thinly veiled threats. Santos read each one carefully, then filed them away with the same polite response. The Terran Federation was not currently accepting requests for technical assistance from Council members. On Harmony Station, complete chaos had taken hold. Manager Crix watched helplessly as two freight haulers collided in the main shipping lane, scattering cargo pods across space. Without human traffic control systems, the galaxy's busiest trade hub had become a deadly obstacle course. "Sir," his deputy reported with exhaustion, "we've had 37 collisions this week. Insurance companies are refusing to cover ships that dock here." Crix nodded wearily. The beautiful space station that had once been the crown jewel of galactic commerce was now avoided by sensible captains. Trade was grinding to a halt as shipping became too dangerous and expensive. What about the emergency repairs to the communication array? The Thetheran engineers say they need at least 6 months to understand the human quantum relay technology. Until then, we're limited to short-range communications. Isolation was becoming the norm across Council space. With communication networks failing and transportation becoming unreliable, each species was being forced back onto their own resources. The galactic civilization that had seemed so advanced and interconnected was fragmenting into isolated worlds, struggling to survive. In the Veltron Consortium, Trader Prince Veltharn faced economic collapse on a scale that made historical disasters seem minor. His carefully constructed financial empire was crumbling, as automated systems made increasingly erratic decisions. "My lord," his chief economist reported, "the market prediction algorithms have started trading against themselves. Our own systems are competing with each other and driving prices into impossible ranges." "What do you mean, impossible ranges?" "Yesterday, the price of common metals exceeded the total monetary supply of the galaxy. The computers are creating money that doesn't exist to buy resources that can't be delivered." Veltharn stared at displays showing numbers that made no mathematical sense. Somehow, human-designed systems had become so sophisticated that removing human oversight had caused them to break the laws of economics. Emergency council sessions were called daily now, but fewer species attended each time. Some governments had collapsed entirely. Others were too busy with internal crises to participate in galactic politics. The Grand Alliance that had condemned humanity was dissolving into desperate individual struggles for survival. And in the depths of space, human observation posts quietly monitored the situation, recording everything, analyzing the patterns of failure, and preparing detailed reports for the Terran government. They watched with scientific interest as galactic civilization learned the difference between independence and abandonment. The Galactic Council chambers had never looked so empty. Of the 1,000 seats that once held representatives from across the galaxy, barely 300 were occupied. Some species had lost their governments to internal collapse. Others were too busy fighting for survival to send delegates. The proud assembly that had condemned humanity 6 months ago now resembled a funeral gathering. Councillor Prime Thexavar stood at his podium, looking older than his years. His blue-black skin had lost its luster, and his once commanding voice was hoarse with exhaustion. Around him, the remaining council members sat in stunned silence, each dealing with disasters that would have been unthinkable just months before. "The emergency session will come to order," Thexvar announced, though his words seemed to echo mockingly in the vast empty space. A side door opened and Ambassador Sarah Chen entered the chamber. But she was no longer the solitary figure who had faced their judgment months ago. Now she carried herself with quiet confidence, wearing the formal robes of a Terran Federation special representative. Behind her walked a small delegation of human advisors and observers. The remaining council members stared at her with mixtures of hope, shame, and desperate need. Some couldn't meet her eyes. Others leaned forward eagerly, as if her mere presence might solve their problems. Sarah took her place at the speaker's podium and looked around the chamber with calm assessment. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the vast space. "Honored council members," she began, "the Terran Federation has received numerous requests for assistance over the past months. We appreciate your interest in renewing contact." Chancellor Veltar of the Zephyrian Republic stood up shakily. His proud feathers were now gray and molting, and his voice cracked with desperation. "Ambassador Chen, my people are dying. Our atmospheric systems have failed completely. The northern continent is already uninhabitable and the southern regions are following. We need immediate assistance." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "We are aware of the situation on Zephyr Prime. Our monitoring stations have been tracking the atmospheric degradation with great concern." "Then you will help us?" Veltar asked hopefully. "I'm afraid that would be problematic," Sarah replied gently. "The Galactic Council found the Terran Federation guilty of technological hoarding. Providing atmospheric management technology would seem to violate that ruling." A murmur of distress ran through the chamber. Admiral Korthak of the Kraxi military struggled to his feet, his yellow eyes dim with exhaustion. "Ambassador, surely emergency humanitarian aid is different from technological hoarding," he said desperately. Sarah consulted her tablet with calm efficiency. The original charges were quite specific: technological hoarding, cultural contamination, and refusing proper integration protocols. The Council voted 847-3 that humanity was guilty of these crimes. Dr. Hethanol, representing what remained of the Kalari medical authorities, called out from his seat. "But people are dying. The plague has spread to 12 worlds." "Yes," Sarah agreed sadly. "Our intelligence services report 237 separate famines, 46 ecological collapses, 18 economic crashes, and 47 military defeats by forces you used to handle easily. We have been monitoring the situation with great concern. Trader Prince Veltharn of the Velthran Consortium, his skin now a sickly pale color, spoke up desperately. We were wrong, all of us. We see that now. Surely you can forgive our mistake. Sarah turned to face him directly. Forgive? There's nothing to forgive. You made a democratic decision based on your assessment of the situation. The Terran Federation respects the sovereignty of the Galactic Council. But you could help us, Manager Crix of Harmony Station pleaded. Your technology could fix our problems in days. Our technology, Sarah repeated thoughtfully. Yes, that seems to be the core issue. She paused, looking around the chamber. For 3 centuries, humanity tried to be good neighbors. We shared our knowledge freely, helped wherever we could, and asked for very little in return. She activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy as it had been 6 months ago. We were careful to minimize our contributions to avoid triggering resentment. We took secondary credit to preserve your dignity. We worked behind the scenes to let you shine in the spotlight. The display shifted, showing the current state of galactic civilization. Red indicators marked failed systems across hundreds of worlds. You wanted to prove you didn't need us. Congratulations, you've proved it. Her voice carried a weight of centuries of patience finally exhausted. What you've also proved is what happens when you don't have us. Counselor Prime Thexvar stepped forward, his pride visibly broken. What would it take for humanity to reconsider? What are your terms? Sarah smiled sadly. Terms? The Terran Federation isn't negotiating, Counselor Prime. We're stating facts. The Galactic Council found humanity guilty of serious crimes. Until those charges are formally rescinded and reparations are paid for the damages caused by our forced withdrawal, we see no basis for discussion. Reparations? Chancellor Veltar gasped. But we're the ones suffering. Yes, you are suffering, Sarah acknowledged. And that suffering is a direct result of the Council's decision to force humanity out of galactic civilization. The economic damage alone exceeds 15 trillion galactic credits. The cost in lives lost due to failed medical systems is incalculable. She paused, letting that sink in. The Terran Federation believes that those responsible for causing this damage should be held accountable. The chamber erupted in desperate voices. Council members shouted over each other, offering trade deals, territory, even military alliances. But Sarah waited patiently for silence. There is something else you should understand, she continued when the noise died down. Humanity spent centuries learning to be subtle. We discovered that other species reacted poorly to human superiority, so we hid it. We made you think you were equals when you were actually dependents. The words hit the chamber like physical blows. Some council members recoiled in shock. Others hung their heads in shame. Every major technological advance in the past 2 centuries included human innovation. Every successful medical treatment used human research. Every stable economic system relied on human mathematical models. Every military victory was won with human strategic thinking. Sarah's voice grew more intense. But we let you believe you had done it yourselves. We wrote the programs, then taught you to use the interfaces. We designed the systems, then let you think you were operating them. We solved the problems, then let you announce the solutions. Dr. Zixhala, who had arrived from the research station, spoke up with dawning horror. The cancer research. Marcus did all the real work, didn't he? Dr. Webb and his team developed the theoretical framework, designed the experiments, and analyzed the results, Sarah confirmed. You helped with data collection and sample preparation. Important work, but not the intellectual foundation. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the full scope of their dependence became clear. They had not been equals working with humanity. They had been children playing with toys while adults did the real work. So what happens now? Texvar asked quietly. Sarah looked around the chamber one final time. That depends on you. The Terran Federation has moved on. We're focusing on our own worlds, our own people, our own future. We've learned that the galaxy doesn't want human help. It wants to feel superior while secretly depending on human competence. She picked up her tablet and prepared to leave. If you want to change that dynamic, you know what needs to happen. formal rescission of all charges, public acknowledgement that the original verdict was based on false premises, reparations for the damage caused by forced withdrawal. "And then you'll help us?" Veltar asked desperately. Sarah paused at the exit. "Then we'll consider it. But understand, if humanity returns to galactic affairs, it will be as acknowledged leaders, not hidden helpers. No more pretending we're equals when we're not. No more letting you take credit for our work. No more hiding our contributions to spare your feelings." The chamber door closed behind her, leaving the council members to face the hardest decision in galactic history. They could swallow their pride, admit their complete dependence, and beg humanity to return as their acknowledged superiors. Or they could try to rebuild their civilization from the ruins of their own making. Outside, Sarah looked up at the stars that had once been filled with human ships working quietly to keep galactic civilization running. Now those stars seemed dimmer, sadder. But perhaps if the galaxy could learn humility, they might shine bright again. The choice was no longer humanity's to make.